Welcome to the Big Change the Film interview series, and my name is Jason Cohen. I personally have lost over 120 pounds, and every week I chat with inspiring individuals who've also lost significant amounts of weight, hear their stories, and pass along some of that inspiration to others. Including today's guest and myself, the total pounds lost is now up to 11,422 pounds. If you're enjoying the YouTube series and the podcast, I wanted to ask a favor, which is if you wouldn't mind, please leave us a review and rate us in iTunes under the podcast. It's a great way for other people to find out about what I'm doing and to be able to hear these inspiring stories from others. Also, you may or may not know that I do sell t-shirts, which is a way to support the production of the podcast and also the upcoming film. Information on those t-shirts can be found at bigchangethefilm.com under the store section, and 100% of the profits from that go directly towards the production of the film and the interview series. This week's guest is Anna Bolla. By the time Anna was 5 years old, she was already obese. By the time she was 8 years old, she had already started dieting. And in the 8th grade, she already weighed over 160 pounds. Anna says that everyone around her growing up was overweight as well, and so she figured that it was just the way that it was going to be. A few years ago, Anna watched Forks Over Knives, she read the China study, and she decided that she was going to live a healthier way and a more compassionate way. She's since lost over 55 pounds. She now enjoys running, lifting weights, and she says she feels better than ever. We have a great conversation, and thanks so much for watching. Here's a few words from our sponsor this week, Health IQ, and thanks so much for what they're doing. The Big Change the Film podcast and interview series is sponsored by Health IQ, which is an insurance company that helps health-conscious people like runners, cyclists, weightlifters, vegetarians, and vegans get lower rates on their life insurance. I was intrigued when they first reached out to me and shared the company's values and mission. My contact Tim even told me about how the company cares for the well-being of its own employees by providing a gym to work out in at lunch, healthy eating options, and much, much more. Health IQ can save health-conscious people up to 33% because physically active people have a 56% lower risk of heart disease, 20% lower risk of cancer, and a 58% lower risk of diabetes compared to people who are inactive. 56% of Health IQ customers save between 4 and 33%. They have special rates for those who live an active life, and you can get additional savings by submitting your data through apps like Strava or Runkeeper. Health IQ is the official life insurance partner of USA Weightlifting, Roadrunners Club of America, USA Triathlon, and many more. Go to healthiq.com/BCTF to learn more. Again, that's healthiq.com/BCTF, as in Big Change the Film, to learn more, to help support this show, and to see if you qualify. I appreciate what they're doing with their sponsorship, and 100% of it is going towards the production of this project. Thanks again, Health IQ, for the support. I'm here with Anna Bolla. We got connected. I reached out to her because I saw her article on Forks Over Knives. And first off, Anna, thanks so much for the time and for being open to telling your story. Maybe we could just start off with where you're from and how much weight you've lost.
Well, I'm from originally El Cerrito, California, which is a little suburb close to Berkeley and San Francisco. And I've lost somewhere between 55 and 60 pounds.
Awesome. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And, I was reading your Forks Over Knives article, and it talked about that you were told your entire childhood that you were too fat. Can you talk about that a little bit? What life was like growing up and being overweight, things like that?
Sure. I want to say that I was 110 pounds in the 3rd grade, 120 pounds in the 5th grade, and over 160 pounds in the 8th grade.
Wow.
And so I learned very young that going to the pediatrician's office was not really the most positive experience because they weren't very nice to me because I was fat. And this one pediatrician in particular, believe it or not, took a binder, 3-ring binder, smacked me in the butt at the end of the visit and said, "Bam, lose it." And that was his way of encouraging me.
Oh my goodness.
And another time I was placed, and I must have been about 8 years old, if even 8 years old, I was placed on the airline stewardess diet, which it was the early 80s. It was extremely restrictive, and it was just a ridiculously low amount of calories, and it's something that's not appropriate for a developing kid.
Wow. And so I think I read in the article that you started diets at 13, but you're saying 8. I can't help but think if you're that young and that impressionable, that's got to kind of provide a skewed way of looking at food from a pretty early age.
I would say it definitely did. And it's interesting because what happened was my paternal grandfather died when I was maybe 3.5 years old. And then his widow, my nonna, spent lots and lots of time feeding me and feeding the rest of us. And we're Italian, so that's what you do. You feed each other when you're happy. You feed each other when you're sad. Mangia is good for you. Everything, right? And so I spent lots more time with Nonna, and her company was good for me, and my company was probably great for her. And I was definitely overweight. I mean, really probably obese by the time I was 5 years old. So it's something I lived with my entire life. And, going to school, being the biggest kid in class, I was also really tall. I developed like really early and hit puberty very early. And I'm sure it had something to do with the animal products in my diet. I'm certain. So I had a kind of a different experience. I didn't get to be a kid for very long because I was so big.
Wow, yeah. And I think, I saw in there you mentioned that a boy in high school told you that you were built like a linebacker and it was absolutely crushing. I'm just thinking, again, when we're kids, we're so impressionable. We develop our palates, we develop our psyche, like all those things are kind of developed. What was that like for you mentally growing up, dealing with all this and hearing all this?
Yeah, that's a good question. It was always present, even when people weren't teasing me about it or asking me how much I weighed or making comments about what size I wore. It was always present. So it really, I don't know. These are good questions. This is it sucked. I mean, I don't know what more to say. It was rough, but I just sort of accepted it as life because most of the folks in my family are overweight, and, it's just the way it was going to be. I never would have imagined that I would weigh less at 44 years old than I did in the 8th grade. I didn't see this coming.
Wow. Yeah, and I think it's important to, either talk about or acknowledge some of these things because for some people who may be listening who are still struggling with their weight or still struggling with image, to realize that those things are kind of developed at an early age. And also, I think to myself, for those who maybe have kids who maybe struggle with things, to understand what they might be going through, especially if they didn't struggle with weight themselves.
I agree.
So, that's high school. What did life look like going forward from there? And then did you continue on, diets after 13 and after all that, or what did your relationship with food and your weight kind of look like from there?
Yeah, I would say I continued to diet on and off, but my main thing was exercise. So I was in the 180s and the 190s, and I was commuting to school, to college by bicycle. And I was also, I should add, I was a vegetarian for 26 years prior to going vegan. So I really thought I was healthy, and I thought that I was just overweight because my family was overweight. I didn't really get it that I was overweight because I was inhaling animal products. Calling myself vegetarian, but still inhaling, particularly cheese and ice cream and pizza and all that garbage. So let's see. So getting into college, I didn't date, and it's not because I didn't want to date. I got some attention from people, but it just wasn't going to happen. I was uncomfortable with my body, and I was really overweight. And unfortunately, there's not a lot of, there you go. There's your picture again. Okay. Much better. You don't exactly get asked out left and right when you're pushing 200 pounds at 5'2". And it's really unfortunate because I have absolutely no judgment and nothing against people who are overweight. But for me, it just didn't happen. So I would say that it seriously affected my social life. I mean, my dating life. My social life was fine. But I look back at my college years and I didn't have any boyfriend the whole time I was in college. And I think that was probably a big part of it. Not that that was the goal because I was so busy with school at the time, but it definitely affected me. It affected me every time I went shopping and I bought clothing because it fit and not because I liked it. Um, you know?
And then, I know you said you like to work out. That was your thing before. Did you have any limitations, that your weight gave you in terms of like physically, were there struggles that you had related to your weight?
Yes, good question, because I almost forgot to tell you. I had a debilitating lower back problem. I had a lot of issues with my back. My feet hurt all the time. Even certain yoga postures, I just would never have dreamed that I would be able to get into now. So yeah, it definitely affected the kinds of exercise that I could get. And also just my fear of being in public in a bathing suit prevented me from even going to the beach when I was studying at UC Santa Cruz. I never once went to the beach in a swimsuit the entire time I was studying down there, which is really quite sad. But yeah, I did experience a lot of limitations.
And then can you kind of give me an idea, a picture of your health in terms of, did you have any struggles, were you on any meds? Did you have any, health implications as a result?
Well, I'll tell you, I'm sure I did, but I wasn't aware of them at the time because I avoided routine checkups with the doctor like the plague. And I also had a horrible needle phobia, which miraculously I've overcome somehow.
I need to
So,
learn about that one because I'm still phobic.
oh, really? Okay, yeah, we could talk sometime. But, everybody else in my family has high cholesterol, high blood pressure. My mom is on and off insulin. My dad had quadruple bypass, abdominal aortic aneurysms, and ultimately passed from pancreatic cancer. Siblings with high blood pressure and high cholesterol. I don't know why I would have been any different because I was the heaviest of the three kids. I just don't know what those numbers were. And that's really frustrating because now I know what my numbers are. And oh my God, what I wouldn't give to know what the difference is. Because I know there's a difference. I mean, I'm in a quite a different body now than I was before.
Yeah, wow. Now, we're talking, obviously things have changed pretty drastically for you. So what happened? Did you have a rock bottom moment? Did things change slowly for you? What happened to your life to change so much?
Well, part of what happened is I came across, is it okay to mention the name of some documentaries that I
Sure, of
came
course.
across?
Yeah.
Okay. So I was working I should back up a little bit. Sorry. I was a commercial truck driver for 11 years. So for many years of my 20s and part of my 30s, I was trucking 500 plus miles a day.
Wow.
And part of the reason I want to mention this is because, like it or not, no matter how much you exercise after work or before work, it's still unnatural to sit for 500 miles a day, right? And I hid by wearing Ben Davis work shirts with the zipper up the front, you know, um, men's size extra large. And I wore those shirts for years. So whether or not I was up 10 pounds or down 10 pounds, I could hide it. So what changed is, and it happened very slowly over the course of a few years. And honestly, it was for the most part unintentional because every time I tried to lose weight in the past, it didn't work. And this just kind of was, um, it was a gradual, drastic lifestyle change in every department, with work, with exercise, with food, everything changed. But it was very, very slowly. So I got out of the truck. I became a commercial vehicle inspector, working at the truck scales. And I found myself in an extremely oppressive environment with, unfortunately, some difficult characters who sort of made a joke of me because I drove a Prius and didn't eat meat and voted differently than they did. And then I came across this documentary called Earthlings, which I don't know if you know it, but it's extremely graphic. And I was done. That was it. I was in this really oppressive environment, and I watched over the course of a couple nights clips, well, the entire documentary, and that was it. I was never going to consume any animal products ever again. It was that much of a, made that much of an impression on me. And shortly thereafter, I watched Forks Over Knives, and it completely just like rattled me because, you know, here, the people I love the most are sick. Everybody's sick. You're abnormal if you're an adult in America and you're not on some kind of maintenance meds, right? And it's just sort of understood that you're going to go on Lipitor, you might end up on metformin, and, you know, it's, oh, well, you know, 2/3 of the population has fatty liver disease, whatever, right? So those changes happened. And, I lost a little bit of weight. And then it fell off just like so fast. And I wasn't even really keeping up with how much weight I was losing. And believe me, when I first became vegan, it's not like I was like strictly plant-based, no oil, salt, or sugar, nothing like that. I replaced a lot of my vegan food. I replaced a lot of my regular cheese pizzas and pasta with pesto and that kind of stuff with vegan versions. And even though I do still eat that way a little bit, for the most part now, I try to eat more whole foods and less oil and that kind of stuff. But to get back to your question, I found myself, I had so much more energy after changing my diet that I had to exercise. I couldn't not exercise because I had all this energy. I was bouncing off the walls. So then I started running, started lifting weights, and then, believe it or not, I found myself 40 years old and training to try to get into the police academy. So I was taking these physical agility tests with different departments, and I was going up against mostly men in their early 20s. And, I was able to land a job. I don't want to get too specific, but in that field. And I did so in my early 40s. And, part of it is you have to drag a dummy that's a 165-pound dummy, drag him 10 or 12 feet, run, handcuff simulator, all of these very physical tasks that there's no way I could have gotten through that at 23 years old, 25 years old. So, I'm a work in progress. We're all works in progress. I don't worry too much about the number on the scale. But like you said earlier, the way my clothing fits is, it's a good start.
Yeah, for sure. So how, the cheese and the dairy always, seems to come up. It's a common thread with a lot of people that it's oftentimes the last one to fall, so to speak. What was it for you about the dairy and the cheese that was so difficult?
Well, now I realize that it was truly an addiction, and I've read about the casomorphines and all of that. But, it was easy. I'm going to be completely honest. I tried to go vegan at age 18, and I made it for a little while and then slipped back because of cheese and ice cream. And then I tried again at age 23. And I was at age 23, I was like doing the McDougall plan, and it was, I was full speed ahead, right? And that didn't stick either. And I think I was so angry because I'd been misled my whole life about nutrition after I really woke up to the reality of what animal products do to your body. And I felt so good. And I felt like I had some control. So it was, 6.5 years ago or whenever, just was easy. Cheese doesn't matter anymore, and I do once in a while, I'll eat a little bit of vegan cheese, but then I'll go months without having it in the house because I don't need it,
Yeah. And you basically had been kind of a lifelong dieter at this point, or you'd been, you had tried things for most of your life. Was there a point with this one that you realized that things had changed and things were just different than all the previous, quote unquote attempts before?
Yeah, the previous attempts were, it was a different time. Maybe this is an excuse, but it was a different time. That's almost 20 years ago that I gave it a shot for the first time. No, more than 20 years ago. I'm a lot older than I think. 20 something, 25 years ago. It's just so easy now. You know,
And
there's there are alternatives everywhere. And I also, I don't want to make it sound like anybody can just go to the store and fill their cart with raw cashews purchased in bulk and I don't know, like specialty items. No, that's not the truth. And we do have to be aware of, to a certain degree, I think I was able to make these choices because I come from sort of a privileged place. There are food deserts very close to where I live where you simply cannot purchase fresh produce. There's no fresh produce to purchase. There are gas stations and convenience stores that really just have garbage. And I'm lucky. So I had access and it just became important to me. It became like a huge part of my life and it had nothing to do with dieting. I want to say it really had very little to do with dieting or weight loss. It just became like a huge part of my life and it's my passion. So the more, when I first went vegan and even now, and this is, 6.5+ years later, I can't get enough information about the health benefits of it and the environmental benefits of what we're doing. And what I do in my spare time is I read stuff that's put out by the Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. And I find myself watching YouTube videos, of what other vegans are doing and cooking and what they're doing as far as exercise. And it's just extremely interesting to me that there's this huge community and we're spread out all over the world. And wherever you go, you can find vegan food. I mean, in Greece, in Italy, anywhere. Um, and it's a different time. I think we're moving forward. It's happened slowly. And so for anybody who's considering going vegan, just know that you do have support. There's a great community of people. If you're on Facebook, you can join a bunch of vegan and plant-based groups and get recipes and all kinds of great ideas.
yeah, it's certainly, I think in some ways, almost a golden time to be experiencing some of this stuff, because even just in the last several years for me, from when we kind of started this journey, my wife and I, things have changed so drastically. People are familiar with words. The word vegan or plant-based doesn't have the same connotation sometimes as it used to, or at least people are kind of a little more familiar with it. So there couldn't be a better time to be, exploring it. So you're Italian. People, love Italian food. It's not usually the lowest calorie or the lowest fat. So how have you, kind of blended what you cooked before, your, cultural identity, all those things into what you do now eating wise?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, what most people think of when they think of Italian food is like Italian American food. And, anything anybody else does, Americans can do bigger, right? And in larger portions
That's right.
with more calories and more cheese. So, actually, my father's family is from the Liguria region in the north. And I was lucky because I grew up with a lot of vegetables in our diet and we were, still eating animals and animal products, but there were always lots of vegetables and I was gardening with my grandmother growing up. And so, growing up, it was like ravioli, pasta with pesto, polenta. minestrone soup, lots of fresh salads and fresh tomatoes, raw tomatoes with onions, a little bit of olive oil. So it's been really easy to basically veganize pretty much all of my family recipes, even frittata, which I used to make with a lot of eggs. And so I make those now using tofu. And the pasta with pesto, I don't use any cheese. I use some cashews to make the sauce creamier. There's something delicious called farinata, which is like a beautiful chickpea bread. Kind of, not really a bread. It's halfway between a bread and, I don't know, kind of like it looks like a pizza. And you'll find different variations of farinata in different places in the world. So in France, they call it soca, and they also eat it in parts of the Middle East. And it's basically just chickpea flour, water, and olive oil, salt, onion. We add rosemary. It's really easy. It's really easy to veganize the family recipes. And I was actually visiting my family just this last October. And because Italians are so passionate about food and it's of utmost importance to feed everyone, my family, and a lot of them are in their 70s, these are not, people who heard about veganism because they're in their 20s and they're in college. And they were basically like fighting over who would get to cook for us next. And they were cranking out the most incredible vegan food, like they'd been doing it forever. So I am really fortunate that I grew up with just knowledge of a lot of vegetables and fruits. And that's something that not everybody grew up with. Some people, when my boyfriend and I first got together, he's just one example. He didn't know the difference between an eggplant and a butternut squash. And he had never had artichokes before. And, this is a lot of America. This is not just him. Folks grow up with macaroni and cheese, and a vegetable is what? Corn on the cob during the summer? French fries?
French fries, definitely a vegetable.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, because I know you mentioned it a little bit, and I usually don't go too much into the nuances of diet with people unless they want to talk about it. But you did mention olive oil. You mentioned it sounded like it was a big part. How has that changed? What does that look like now? How have you kind of wrapped your head around that?
I'm so glad you asked that question, because I heard myself talking about it and I'm like, I'm really not consuming very much of it at all anymore. That was huge. That was a huge difference. We basically drenched everything in oil when I was growing up. And when my nonna was cooking, it was olive oil, butter, and cheese. And so you can imagine, like, oh my God.
Pure fat.
Yeah, seriously. So at this point, I cook with almost no olive oil at all. Actually, what I do most of the time is I cook in cast iron, and the most that I'll do normally is spray the pan with a quick spray of canola spray. And that's not even all the time, because I find that I'm cooking more with vegetable broth and just adding a few tablespoons of water at a time and trying to move as close to being completely plant-based as possible. And also, we've incorporated a lot of green smoothies into our diet just to get enormous amounts of raw greens into our diet, which, I don't know when I go to work if I'm going to put in a 10-hour day or a surprise 16-hour day or something like that. And sometimes I don't even have time to actually eat a meal. And so slowly sipping on a green smoothie, it's really saved me. It's been really helpful.
Yeah, it's amazing. I think once you kind of learn the nuance of cooking with vegetable stock specifically, and water and whatnot, it's really not that hard to wean yourself off of the oil. Just takes a little bit of practice. You may burn a couple of things here and there, and you definitely cannot leave it unattended. Well, looking back in the rearview mirror, what about this journey has surprised you?
It's been so easy this time. It hasn't, and I don't want to make it sound like it would be easy for everyone. That would be great if that were the truth, but it's not the truth. it's a combination of me being older and, you know, even though the women in my family tend to live to be quite old, I'm looking more realistically at my mortality. And when you see the people around you taking medication and having surgeries and procedures, I don't want to live that way. So it's just been, I don't know, it's like the best of both worlds. I got into it originally because I love animals and I didn't want to continue to contribute to what happens to them. And the side effect was I got healthier, you know, and it's really that simple. Did I answer your question?
I think so. I think, you know, sometimes it can be easy to confuse quantity of life versus quality of life.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, kind of like, you know, yeah, you could live to be, you know, a bit older than maybe you would otherwise without drugs, but you still quality of life and everything that comes with side effects of those drugs. And, you know, it's not necessarily the best. So I think it sounds like your quality of life is better than you were anticipating.
Much better. It's an understatement. I feel like, I don't know, I feel like I have a completely new life, and it's a trip that I'm in my mid 40s now, and I feel better than I did when I was 18, and I weigh less than I did when I was in the 8th grade, and I'm able to help other people, you know, who are just starting out, asking questions, trying to figure out what to eat, where to go for their food. It's been a life changer. I feel like it's unfortunate that it didn't stick when I gave it a shot when I was 18 and in my early 20s, because I want to say my life would have probably been a bit different, you know. I just feel like, I don't know, I can't recommend this lifestyle highly enough. It's really remarkable, you know, to see people around you reversing diseases, getting off their medication, becoming more mobile, getting rid of their walkers because they don't need them anymore. This is something else.
That's fantastic. Well, you know, speaking of people who are starting out, what advice would you give to someone who's at the beginning of this journey, who's giving some consideration to all this and is wanting to, you know, make a change for their own lives?
Yeah. Reach out as much as possible. And even if it's not to actual people who are right there, like at work or at school or physically there, reach out, get on Facebook, join several vegan Facebook groups, watch Forks Over Knives. If you have Netflix, type the word vegan or plant-based in the search bar. Go through all the documentaries. Consume as much information about veganism and plant-based eating as you can. And you'll be completely unstoppable. The more information you get, it's just, it'll change everything, you know? It's, I don't know. It's, like I said, it's something that I do for fun. I'm like, as a hobby, I go on YouTube and I check out what the vegan bodybuilders are doing, you know? So yeah, there's so much information and it's so easily accessible. Everybody, it seems, has an iPhone or internet access. And we've never had so much information right at our fingertips as we do right now. And if you're interested, reach out. There's a community of people who are just on the edge of their seats waiting to help you. And pick up a few good cookbooks or just find recipes online for free. And, you know, make changes gradually or do it cold turkey the way I did. Either way, it's definitely possible. It's possible for everybody.
And, you know, just a few more questions, and one that I don't always ask, but, you know, it sounds like you were a bit of a cook and you still are. Are there any websites or places or cookbooks that you found particularly helpful for you in kind of making the transition that, you know, are really good?
Yeah. Boy, that's a good question. Veganomicon is good.
How do you spell that?
It's vegan, Omicon, Omicon.
Okay.
Not necessarily the most low-fat recipes, but at the same time, it's a good start, you know. What else? There's another book called The Big Vegan, and I think her last name, Robin Asbell, Asbell. That's also very good. The Oh She Glows cookbook. Why am I blanking out on her name? She's wonderful.
Angela Liddon.
She has incredible. Angela Liddon. She has
Yeah.
incredible recipes, and they're super healthy. And she throws chickpeas in makes the chickpea pudding and the vegan overnight oats, which are just delicious. And you whip them up the night before, leave them in the fridge, and they're really good. Forks Over Knives has some good recipes as well. And there's the Forks Over Knives Family Cookbook. I think that's what it's called. Oh my God, there's so many cookbooks. And
well, that's all.
Let me think. I know there are more.
That's all great. No, it's sometimes just helpful for people to hear, because it's easy to fall upon a website or a blog that maybe doesn't look good to you or is, a little daunting, or maybe, the recipes just aren't all that fantastic sometimes, and it's easy to get turned off for one of those various reasons.
That's true.
If you could go back in time and have a conversation with yourself, when you were in high school or college or, earlier in life, what would you say to that person to give her some encouragement?
Boy, if I could go back in time, to rob Dr. John McDougall's line, it's the food. So I was biking miles a day, hiking, running, lifting weights, but the food prevented me from changing in any way. I read recently that it's 70%. Food is 70% of weight loss, and exercise. You can't exercise away a bad diet. There's really something to that, because I always exercised, and I was still 200 and something pounds. And, I felt like I was fit, but I feel much fitter now, much more fit. So yeah, that's what I would tell myself. That I really, really needed to change the food, Yeah,
70% even sounds low to me.
I know, huh? I'm like, maybe it's 95.
Yeah, exactly. Well, if people are hearing your story and it's resonating with them, what's the best way for people to connect with you?
Oh, so on Facebook, Anna, middle initial N Bolla, and anybody who'd like to ask questions or ask for recipes, wants to make pasta with pesto with no oil and no cheese, hit me up. Really, you can't bother me too much. I'm available all the time for vegan cooking and guidance. Yeah, I'd be happy to help. I'd be happy to help anybody.
Awesome. I'll be the first one looking for that recipe. Well, cool. Well, Anna, thanks again for the time and for sharing your story, your openness, and I look forward to keeping up with you, and congratulations on everything you've accomplished.
Thank you. Thank you. It's been a real pleasure.
All right. Have a great day.
Okay. You too.